Whether you're watching this first thing in the morning or it's 10 minutes before the bell rings at the end of the day, Fridays are awesome. I'm Carl Azuz with CNN Student News. There are just over 316 million people in the U.S., and 2/3 of them are feeling a blast of unseasonably cold weather. Now, cold is relative. Today's high here in Atlanta, Georgia is 46, but it's normally 64 this time of year. The other day, Casper, Wyoming's high was 2, as in 2 degrees. It's normally 45 right now. Denver, Colorado, Lubbock, Texas, Livingston, Montana, they've all set records this week involving cold temperatures for mid-November. It's not that it never gets cold in these places or other American cities, it's that it never does it so early in the season. So why?
Blame the bomb cyclone. Yep, that's right. Bomb cyclone is actually a real weather term. Frigid weather and snow are already in the U.S. So how did it happen? Blame it on the leftovers from Super Typhoon Nuri. It barreled up to Alaska, mixing warm tropical air with the polar vortex and changing the direction of the jet stream, allowing cold air to spill into the U.S. Normally, the polar vortex stays where it's supposed to be, in the North Pole, trapping frigid air up where it belongs. But the bomb cyclone shook things up and sent all that Arctic air south. Bottom line, winter came early, and it might be here to stay.
Quite a different natural event to catch you up on in the 50th U.S. state. We've been reporting on a slow-moving disaster, a creeping lava flow from Hawaii's Kilauea volcano. Since late June, the 2,000-degree lava has been bubbling its way toward a Hawaiian town named Pahoa. It overtook and burned down a home there earlier this week. It happened in 45 minutes. No one was hurt. The family had evacuated in September. There's hope for other parts of the community. For several days now, there's been a pause in the lava's advance. The eruption hasn't stopped, but the main lava flow isn't moving towards structures at this time. Scientists with the European Space Agency say their Rosetta mission is trying to answer very big questions about the solar system's history. But a simpler question they're working on involves their comet lander. Where exactly is it? The $1.4 billion mission made history this week by placing a spacecraft on the comet 67P, but not everything's gone according to plan.
Absolutely stunning images that we're seeing from the surface of the comet 67P, which is, of course, some 310 million miles away from Earth. Now, the interesting thing about these images is that they're stunning to the scientists themselves. They believe that on the comet's surface they would find a very powdery substance. They believe the surface itself might be very soft, and that the lander, if bad comes to worse, might sink in and wouldn't be able to transmit any signals back to Earth. However, what we're seeing on these images seems to be a very rocky surface, but it's unclear whether or not those are really rocks or whether those might be ice crystals mixed with some sort of metallic dust. Again, these are all things that the Philae lander is supposed to find out in the coming days. One of the interesting things that they just told us is that the landing seems to have been a rodeo ride by any stretch of the imagination. What happened was Philae lander came and touched down pretty much in exactly the spot where they wanted to touch down, but then a harpoon system didn't deploy. It jumped back up. That jump took 2 hours because, of course, there's very little gravity here. Then it came back down very close to some sort of crater, jumped again for another 7 minutes, and then came to a standstill. And they think that right now it's on the edge of a cliff. It's probably standing with 2 feet on the ground. The 3rd foot, they believe, is up in the air. They're not exactly sure where it is right now. They know it's on the comet because that's what the sensors are telling them. And they say that pretty much all of the scientific instruments are working. The one thing they think might be a problem is drilling, because the harpoon system failed, and therefore the comet is not attached to the lander, or the lander attached to the comet, and they're afraid if they try something like that, that it might actually fall off the comet. There is one problem that they have with the mission right now, and that is the place where they're at right now, close to that cliff, seems to be pretty far away from any sort of sunlight, so they're getting a lot less sunlight than they actually thought. And that's a problem because right now it's running on battery power, but it will need power on the solar panels. It's going to need light rays if it wants to recharge those batteries and continue the scientific experiments for a long time to come. So that is something that they're working on. They say it could impact the mission, but at this point in time, of course, people here in this town of Darmstadt, Germany, absolutely jubilant at what they've achieved, and that is to catch a comet in the middle of space.
getting thousands of roll call requests on our transcript page at cnnstudentnews.com. Thanks for your continued requests and your patience. We're kicking things off at Washington Middle School. It's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's the home of the Raiders. Paddling upstream to Beaver Creek High School, it's in Beaver Creek, Ohio, with the Beavers watching CNN Student News. And in the Pine Tree State, the city of Old Town, Maine, we've got the Coyotes, or the Coyotes of Old Town High School. Hello to all of you. An investigator for the United Nations says North Korea's leader may be responsible for massive human rights abuses. A UN report published in February accused the Asian country's government of torturing, murdering, and starving people. It didn't directly name Kim Jong-un, but a UN investigator now says there is enough evidence to hold the dictator responsible. North Korea says the investigation is part of a U.S. plot to destroy its political system. We know that system is communist. We know the government controls the media. We know that Kim Jong-un leads that government. But there's a lot we don't know about Kim himself.
North Korea is famous for creating a cult of personality around the leaders of the country, and Kim Jong-un is no exception. He was the youngest son of the previous leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-il, and his favorite wife, Ko Young-hee. Now, as a child, he was sent to a prestigious boarding school in Switzerland, where he registered under an assumed name and claimed to be the son of a Korean diplomat. He then attended a Korean military academy and was quickly promoted up the military's ranks. Within days of his father's death in 2011, Kim Jong-un was transitioned into power with support from the country's ruling elite. Now, despite North Korea's pariah status on the international stage, Kim Jong-un is creating an almost godlike image for himself at home, similar to that of his grandfather, Kim Il-sung. Wherever he goes, he's met with fanatical devotion. Men wade waist deep just to get a look at him. Women are crying at his feet. It's really hard to know how much of this devotion is real, but the North Korean regime is doing a pretty good job of keeping the cult of Kim alive. Now, just like his father before him, Kim has drawn the ire of the international community for his nuclear antics and his human rights abuses. Since he took power, prison camps in North Korea have expanded, and there's been a serious crackdown on would-be defectors. Kim shocked the world when he had his own uncle executed. And since then, he's been purging party officials who have any connection to the uncle. Lately, to try and deflect some of that criticism, Kim has been trying to show his softer side. He's been photographed touring children's hospitals and orphanages, and he's ordered construction of amusement parks and ski resorts in the country. But despite the cult of personality that Kim has created, North Korea is still seen as one of the most opaque countries in the world. North Korea watchers say the jovial face we see masks a dark reality for the North Korean people.
Two things that may not seem like they go together: surfing and Alaska. Yes, you need a wetsuit, and the wave not far from Anchorage can tumble for 50 miles. It's a boar tide, when seawater surges in from a broad bay to a narrowing inlet. The young lady you see surfing the Turn Again Arm boar tide says she'll go for as long as she can stand and not get distracted by the beautiful scenery. Sometimes she'll even take a rest, even while she's riding the wave. Of course, a boar tide or a tidal bore could become a tidal bore if you detide your board and abhor the ride of the tide and the bore. If not, the tide ride is good tidings for good ridings with time and tide, tide for a ride, delighting riders, biding time, tide riding. Tongue-tied, I'm Carl Azus for CNN Student News.